Detective Ginny O'Malley and Ben Carter walked into the Hot Springs Police Department, a city of stark contrasts. One half of the city felt like a tranquil national park with its historic bathhouses and gentle streams, while the other throbbed with the high-stakes energy of Oaklawn racing and gaming, a world of money, ambition, and secrets. They say Hot Springs is where the mob used to come to vacation, Ben said, a wry grin on his face. Seems like a fitting place for our next one. Ginny held a file, its cover sheet starkly outlining the cold case missing person, Isabelle Izzy Moreno. March 15th, 2012, Oaklawn Race Track. Izzy Moreno, Ginny read aloud. A jockey? The best, Ben confirmed, pulling up a photo on his tablet. A rising star. She was only 23, but she was a phenom. The first woman in years to win the Arkansas Derby. This case went cold fast because it made no sense. Izzy's disappearance was as baffling as it was high profile. She had been scheduled to ride in a major stakes race, the final one of the day. She was last seen in the jockey's room, vibrant and confident, an hour before the race. She never made it to the paddock. Her riding silks, helmet, and boots were all still in her locker. Her car was untouched in the employee parking lot. Every corner of Oaklawn, from the bustling grandstand to the quiet barns, was searched. Not a trace. No witnesses saw her leave the building? Ginny asked. No camera footage? Nada, Ben replied. The back hallway to the jockey's room had a camera, but it had conveniently gone out earlier that morning. It was deemed a technical issue. The case had been aggressively investigated for months, but local law enforcement found no motive. Izzy had no known enemies, no significant debts, and no apparent personal drama. Her connections were all within the tight-knit horse racing community. Her trainer, an old-school horseman named Frank the Colonel Thompson, and a stable owner and benefactor, Eleanor Vance, who had been funding Izzy's career. Izzy was their golden ticket, Ben said, flipping to a photo of Izzy with Frank and Eleanor. A sure thing, a high-stakes race with a huge purse. Why would she disappear? Or be disappeared, Ginny added, a cold note in her voice. What about the race itself? Who won? A long shot named Devil's Due, ridden by a rival jockey named Jake the Serpent Sterling, Ben answered. Sterling and Izzy had a tense relationship, apparently. He was known for being aggressive, and he resented her success. He was the prime suspect, but he had an alibi and nothing ever stuck. The case file was a testament to a 24-hour whirlwind of activity followed by a complete dead end. It felt less like a crime and more like a magic trick, a talented young woman made to vanish in plain sight. Ginny felt a familiar prickle of intuition, a sense of a carefully constructed facade hiding a brutal truth. The polished world of Oaklawn, she suspected, hid a dark underbelly, where winning wasn't just about speed, but about eliminating obstacles. We should start with the stables, Ginny decided, closing the file. Finn and Echo can get a sense of the place. Maybe the trail wasn't on the grandstand side of the track. Maybe it started in the one place they didn't think to look. The air at Oaklawn's stables was a heady mix of hay, worn leather, and the earthy, powerful scent of horse. Ginny and Ben, flanked by Finn and Echo, walked the backstretch, a world separate from the manicured grandstand. Finn, ever the keen observer, moved with a silent, assessing grace, while Echo's nose worked tirelessly, taking in the myriad of new scents. This is a world of its own, Ben commented, watching grooms move with a quiet efficiency. Everyone has a role. Everything is about routine. Their first stop was the barn that belonged to Frank the Colonel Thompson, Izzy Moreno's former trainer. Frank, now in his late 70s, was a relic of a bygone era, his face a roadmap of every sun-soaked day spent on the track. His eyes held a weary sadness that hadn't faded in 10 years. Izzy was like my own, Frank said, his voice a low gravel. Never had a girl work so hard. Never saw talent like that. Her disappearance, it killed the spirit of this place for a while. Ginny's gaze drifted from Frank to Echo, who was sniffing intently around the base of a stall, then looked up at Ben. "Mr. Thompson," Ginny said, "we know you were struggling financially back then. Izzy was your golden ticket, wasn't she? A win in the stakes race would have saved your business." Frank's eyes flashed with indignation. "She was saving my business with her talent, not a threat. I was broke, sure. Most trainers are. I never hurt Izzy. Never." He spoke with conviction, his grief a tangible weight. As they talked, Ginny noticed something that the initial police report had dismissed: the stall Izzy's horse, Firefly, had occupied. It was still in use, but a different horse was in it. Ginny's eyes scanned the detailed photographs in the original case file, which showed the stall as it was in 2012. She pointed out a small, barely visible scuff mark on the baseboard, now gone. Their next stop was Jake the Serpent Sterling, the rival jockey. Sterling was now a trainer himself, his face still holding a competitive edge that bordered on arrogance. He dismissed their questions with a dismissive wave. "I had my alibi, and it held up. I was in the jockey's room, then in the paddock, on my horse, getting ready for the race. The police checked the cameras. The cameras in the hallway were out," Ben reminded him. "So I heard," Sterling sneered. "Convenient for everyone, right? I didn't need to do anything. She was a kid with too much talent. She'd get too cocky. That's how jockeys disappear. They push too hard, take a risk that doesn't pay off." Ginny's attention was drawn to a different detail in the old police report, something she'd initially glossed over. The jockey's room was a high-traffic area. Yet on that day, no one had reported seeing Izzy leave, but a stable hand had mentioned seeing a scruffy, panicked dog near the barns just after Izzy's disappearance. It had been dismissed as an errant stray. Ginny glanced at Finn, who was staring intently at a pile of worn-out riding boots and gear near an empty stall. Finn whined softly, not in distress, but in quiet communication. It was a familiar signal. He was noticing something off. Something out of place that only a keen canine eye would catch. "What's wrong, boy?" Ginny asked. Finn just looked back at her, his head tilted. The boots held no scent, no evidence. They were just boots. Ben, seeing Finn's reaction, looked at the pile and then at Jake Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, you won that race, but it must have been an easy win without Izzy to compete with." "A win is a win," Sterling said, a flash of something in his eyes that wasn't just smugness, but something colder. The two detectives left, a knot of unease tightening in their stomachs. Frank's grief seemed genuine, but his financial desperation was a clear motive. Jake's arrogance was off-putting, but his alibi had never broken. The initial police work, while thorough, had been conducted in a frenzy of activity, a whirlwind of interviews and searches. But in the years since, the dust had settled, and in the silent spaces of the Oaklawn Race Track, Ginny and Ben felt they were beginning to hear the first subtle whispers of a truth long buried. "That scruffy dog," Ginny murmured to Ben, walking away from the stables. "The one they dismissed. I have a feeling he wasn't a stray. I have a feeling he was with Izzy, and he was the only witness." Their next step was clear: find a different kind of witness. They needed to find that dog. Ginny and Ben knew that in a world of lies and secrets, the most honest witness would be one that couldn't speak. They decided to find the scruffy dog. The original police report had listed the stable hand, a young man named Tommy who had briefly mentioned the dog before being dismissed. He was a long shot, but their only lead. The record showed Tommy was now living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in North Little Rock, working as a mechanic. He was a man in his late 30s, his hands perpetually stained with grease. He remembered the day Izzy disappeared with a vivid clarity. Everyone was running around, frantic, he recalled, wiping his brow with a rag. But the weirdest part was that dog. He described a small, wire-haired terrier mix, dirty, and with a panicked look in its eyes. He was running back and forth from the jockey's building to the back of Thompson's barn, barking like crazy. Did you know the dog? Ben asked. Tommy shook his head. Never saw it before, but it was acting like it was lost or waiting for someone who wasn't coming. He looked at Ginny and Ben, a flicker of a long-ago memory in his eyes. That's when it got weird. A few days later, a guy from one of the other stables, a new guy, showed up asking if anyone had seen a little scruffy dog. Said it was his. He described the man, a quiet, intense individual who kept to himself. The new guy, a hot walker named Cody Black, said his dog Scout had gone missing a few days prior. The dog's description matched, but when Tommy asked where the dog had been missing from, Cody got evasive, saying it had just run off from his place. Ginny and Ben looked at each other. Cody Black. A new name not in the original file, a man who owned a dog that was frantically barking at a very specific location right after Izzy vanished. Their instincts screamed. They found Cody Black now working at a horse farm in a remote part of Arkansas. He was still the same quiet, intense man, but his eyes, when he saw the detectives, immediately clouded with suspicion. "I've got nothing to do with that," he said immediately, his face unreadable. "I told the police my dog was missing and that was it." Ginny held up a photo of Izzy Moreno. "Was your dog friends with Izzy, Mr. Black? Did she take him for a walk sometimes?" Cody's defenses crumpled for a moment. "Yeah, sometimes she liked him." "Did he like you?" Ginny asked, pushing her. Cody didn't answer. He simply looked away, his jaw tight. Ben stepped in, pulling a photo of the back of Frank Thompson's barn where the dog was seen. "We have a witness who says your dog was running back and forth from the jockey's building to this spot, barking his head off." Cody finally broke, a silent tear rolling down his cheek. "Scout. He was trying to get help. He was trying to tell me. He wouldn't leave her. He confessed that he wasn't just a hot walker. He was a part-time security guard for Jake Sterling and a bookie for a small illegal gambling operation that catered to the backstretch. And on the night Izzy disappeared, he had a front-row seat to the truth. Izzy knew something," Cody whispered, his eyes filled with a fresh terror. "She found something out about a fix. She was going to tell the stewards, blow the whole thing wide open. It wasn't just about Jake's resentment, it was about money. A lot of money." He described seeing Izzy argue with Jake Sterling near the back of Frank Thompson's barn. Jake was furious, begging her not to say anything. But Izzy was a woman of principle. He then saw Jake's trainer, a man he recognized, grab her and pull her into the barn. Scout ran after them, barking, but I was a nobody. I was scared. I ran the other way. I hid, Cody said, his voice choked with emotion. I watched from a distance. I saw him leave a few minutes later with a heavy canvas bag. He had been too afraid to come forward, to get involved in something so dangerous. But the guilt had eaten at him for 10 years. The scruffy dog Scout had been the only one trying to tell the truth that day. And now, thanks to 2 dedicated detectives and a new witness, he finally had his voice. The scene of the crime was now solidified, the back of Frank Thompson's barn. The motive was now a specific race-fixing scheme, not just general rivalry. And the murder weapon was most likely the heavy canvas bag Cody had seen. The missing piece of the puzzle, the missing witness, had finally been found. Isabelle Izzy Moreno's story didn't begin at the hallowed grounds of Oaklawn, but in the gritty, anonymous world of a small-town Texas rodeo circuit. Born to a family of migrant farm workers, Izzy's earliest memories were of dust, long days under the sun, and the quiet dignity of her father, a man who believed a person's word was their most valuable possession. The beginning. Izzy's father, a former amateur jockey in Mexico, had to give up his dream to provide for his family. He instilled in Izzy a love for horses and a deep respect for their power. He taught her to ride on a beat-up old mare named Estrella, and Izzy, a tiny girl with preternatural balance and a fearless spirit, took to it instantly. Her first races weren't for money or glory, but for fun, dodging barrels in dusty arenas while her family cheered from the sidelines. Her father had only one rule: you are only as good as your word. He told her stories of jockeys who cheated, trainers who gambled away their stables, and owners who valued money over the well-being of their horses. He warned her that a person could lose everything and still have their integrity, but once their word was gone, they had nothing left. That belief became Izzy's guiding star, her internal compass in a world that often prioritized winning at all costs. The path to Oaklawn. As Izzy grew, so did her talent. She was discovered at a small regional race and quickly moved through the ranks, her skill undeniable. Her size, a disadvantage for most, was a gift in the world of horse racing. She was light, a natural with the horses, and possessed an uncanny ability to connect with them. But her father's words echoed in her ears every step of the way. She walked away from races where she saw signs of a fix, refusing to participate in anything she felt was dishonest. This earned her a reputation as both a purist and a risk to the fragile, often shady ecosystem of professional horse racing. She eventually made her way to Oaklawn, drawn by the prestigious races and the promise of a clean track. It was there she met Frank, the Colonel Thompson. He saw her talent and believed she could be a champion. He also had a secret, a crippling gambling addiction that had nearly destroyed him. Izzy, with her compassionate nature, saw his struggle. Instead of walking away, she felt a moral obligation to help him, believing she could be a positive influence in his life. She trusted him, and he, in turn, trusted her. He became the father figure she hadn't realized she was missing. And she became the daughter he had always wanted. This was the complex bond that made Frank's betrayal so tragic. His desperation to keep his own vice a secret ultimately led to her death. The fatal discovery. On the day of the stakes race, Izzy was more excited than she had ever been. She was a natural with the horses, but she was a perfectionist and didn't leave anything to chance. She was meticulous with her preparation. She checked every detail, even walking the track herself before every race. She was checking on her horse, Firefly, when she discovered evidence of a race-fixing scheme that involved not just Jake Sterling, but also her beloved mentor, Frank Thompson. She confronted Frank, believing that he was a victim of Jake's scheme. That's when she realized that it was his idea all along. The final words Izzy spoke to Frank were not an accusation, but a plea. She told him, "I'm sorry, Frank. I know this will hurt you, but I have to do this. My dad always said that a person is only as good as their word." For Izzy, keeping her word to her father, even posthumously, was more important than any win, any prize, or any friendship. It was a moral line she could not cross, a line that cost her her life. She lived and died by her father's words, a tragic testament to a purity of heart that had no place in the world of greed and deceit she had entered. A tense silence hung over the interrogation room as Ginny and Ben watched Jake Sterling. He had been brought in under the pretense of re-interviewing all known parties, but the detectives had a new kind of leverage now, the truth of a missing dog and a terrified witness. "We talked to Cody Black, Mr. Sterling," Ginny began. "He told us about your side hustle as a bookie, the race fix, and how Isabelle found out." Jake's smirk vanished. His jaw went tight, and he stared at the two detectives, his expression a mixture of disbelief and simmering rage. Cody Black is a liar. He's a burnout. We believe him, Ben countered evenly, because we also have a witness with a better nose for the truth than anyone. Cody's dog, Scout. He told us he saw Scout barking frantically at the back of Frank Thompson's barn right after Izzy disappeared. Ginny leaned forward, her voice dropping. Scout wasn't just barking, Mr. Sterling. He was trying to get help. Because he saw what you did. Jake's composure finally broke. His face twisted with fury. She was going to ruin everything, he snarled, slamming his hands on the table. Our entire stable, everything we worked for, $1 million payout. All because she had to be a saint. She was going to tell the stewards, blow the whole thing up, all for her stupid morals. He stood up, pacing the small room like a caged animal. I went to her in the jockey's room. I begged her, pleaded with her. She just looked at me with that perfect, self-righteous look of hers. She said, some things are bigger than a race, Jake. So I told her to meet me in the barn to talk one last time. Frank wasn't in there, he was up at the stands. But he knew, Ginny said, a cold certainty in her voice. Jake stopped pacing, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Frank was broke. We were both broke. The fix was his idea in the first place. His trainer was a gambling addict just like me. The only difference was his vice was the horses, not the cards. He was the one that talked me into it. He was in on it. He looked at Ginny and Ben, his gaze cold and full of a chilling righteousness. Izzy wasn't supposed to die. I just wanted to shut her up. I just wanted to get my money. But when she threatened to go to the stewards, I grabbed a lead pipe that was hanging up in the barn, and I hit her. I hit her hard. I watched as her eyes rolled into the back of her head and her body fell to the ground. Frank was supposed to take care of her. He sat back down, a look of defeat in his eyes, the confession and the aftermath. Armed with Jake's confession and his intricate details of the race fix and the lead pipe, Ginny and Ben got a warrant for the area around Frank Thompson's barn. With the permission of the current owners, they scoured the property. Echo, with his specialized scent work, led them to an area behind the barn that had been covered with old horse manure and hay for years. He gave his signature final response, sitting down with a quiet certainty. They began to dig, and beneath a foot of compacted soil, they found a plastic bag containing Isabelle's jockey silks, helmet, and boots. They were stained but unmistakably hers, the very items she had been wearing when she was last seen alive. Frank Thompson, a man broken by a secret he'd carried for years, was found in his office, a bottle of bourbon in his hand. He didn't deny it. He corroborated Jake's story, adding the chilling detail that he helped dispose of her body. He told them where he had placed her, in a shallow grave near the stables. He said that he was not a murderer but a coward who helped a murderer for money. He then said, with tears streaming down his face, that Izzy's last words were, I'm sorry, Frank. I know this will hurt you, but I have to do this. My dad always said that a person is only as good as their word. He then proceeded to tell them the location of her body, in a place only a jockey and a stable owner would know about, a place where all horses that have died have been buried. Izzy Moreno, the rising star, who had tried to save her trainer from himself, was finally found. Her story, once a perplexing vanishing act, was now a tragedy of greed and broken trust. Both Jake Sterling and Frank Thompson were arrested. Jake for murder and Frank as an accessory after the fact and for his role in the race fix. The case, long considered unsolvable, was finally closed, all thanks to a courageous witness and two detectives who knew that sometimes the most important truth is one that needs to be sniffed out, not spoken.